Hello and welcome to Nullitaire Gaming, where we play games with 0 players, or in other words, we play bots against one another. And in this series, we've been playing Falling Sky, the Gallic Revolt against Caesar, game designed by Andrew Runke and Volko Runke, and this is volume 6 of the Coin series by GMT. We've started the game already. We've made a few videos already in the series. If you haven't seen those, I recommend go back and watch it from the beginning. So I'll put a link to the full playlist in the description of this video, so you can go back and watch it from the beginning. Okay, so we're going to set up the game from where we were and continue on. Here we go. Alright, the game is set up, back where we were. I did make some notes about some rules corrections. A viewer left a comment that was said the Joe 5. Hopefully I've said that correctly. If not, I apologize. Left some comments making some corrections about the rules from the first video in this series, so going back a bit of a ways. But those comments are quite correct. I did make 4 mistakes in that first video involving the rules. I wanted to quickly mention them. Fortunately, none of my mistakes caused any gameplay problems as far as I can tell. So I think we're still okay as far as the game went along. Okay, the first thing I did is when I explained the win conditions for the Arverni, I didn't do that correctly. I did mention it later in the video though. But the Arverni actually have 2 win conditions. One of those conditions is that they have at least 9 forts or citadels. You can see the different color right there to indicate that when you get to 9, that win condition is satisfied. And the other one is that they need to have at least 7 legions off the map. So you can see that Arverni victory right there once it gets to 7 or higher. Okay, so the Arverni actually have 2 win conditions. And I said they only had that one, the off-map legions. That's not true. They also have this other one over here. They have to have at least 9 allies of citadels on the board. Okay, the other thing was, there was a point where the Arverni were placing allies into the Mandubii region, and at the time there were no pieces on either of those 2. And I said, well, they can just choose randomly between those 2. And I didn't see any reason to prioritize one over the other. That's wrong. Bots always prioritize cities over non-cities. So the Arverni should have placed an ally into the Mandubii region rather than Lingones. I did it randomly because I didn't see that there was a difference. I missed that. And they ended up placing an ally in Lingones. So that was wrong. So I did make a mistake there, a gameplay mistake. However, it ended up that the Arverni eventually managed to put allies and a citadel everywhere in the Mandubii region anyway, so I don't think it ultimately mattered from gameplay perspective in what order they did it. So I don't think that that made any gameplay issues ultimately, but I was wrong about that. Cities first and then non-cities. And here it is on the player aid non-player guidelines summary. And it's also in the rules too. Under place and remove. It says place own pieces in above order, remove own in the reverse order. So we use this order to decide how to place pieces. And so it says legions are first, then citadels forts, then allies, cities, and remi first. Okay, so you prioritize cities and remi. Okay, so remi being a particular allied tribe up here in Belgica. So that's basically treated like a city. All right, so there you have it, cities first. Another rule mistake I made is that at one point the Romans were placing pieces up here in the Atrebates region, and they were trying to determine a supply line, because if they're in supply, it costs them a little less resources, fewer resources to make that play. But I was considering whether they were in supply after the pieces were already in play, which made this an uncontrolled space and therefore could have been in supply. But that's wrong. We should have considered whether they were in supply before the pieces were placed, and at that time the space was under Belgic control, and the Belgians never agreed to supply. So there's no way that that space could have ever been in supply, even though I was considering whether it was. Fortunately, I determined that it wasn't in supply anyway and made them pay appropriately. So they did pay appropriately, but I did get the rule wrong that that space was never even possibly in supply, simply because it was under Belgic control and the Belgians never agree to supply. So even though it ended up being uncontrolled after the pieces were placed, that makes no difference to determining supply. Supply is determined before pieces are placed. Okay, last correction is at one point during quarters. So we were doing a winter quarters round. We were determining how to move the leader. So Ambiorix was over here in Treveri, and I was considering moving Ambiorix over here into Atrebates. But at the time, Atrebates was under Roman control. Okay, so that caused a problem because, as it turns out, according to quarters, so here it is, so the Romans may move legions, auxilia, and leader to adjacent undevastated regions with Romans or in agreeing factions' control. So I overlooked that part. They can only move to a place that's either under their own control or under the control of a faction that agrees, or is uncontrolled. I suppose that's true. They could do that as well. I think. No, I don't think. Maybe they can't actually. Now that I think of it, it says with Roman or in agreeing factions control. So I don't think they can actually move to no control in that case. Yeah, has to be their own control or an agreeing faction. Okay. Oh, yeah, I was reading Romans there, wasn't I? But I think the Belgians are the same. Okay, I was reading Romans. I should have been reading Belgian. Belgae. Okay, but it's the same. Move leaders to adjacent undevastated regions that they or another faction that agrees control. Okay, so anyway, Ambiorix could not have moved into Atrebates without Roman agreement, and of course the Romans would have never agreed to that. So it was wrong to even consider doing that. Fortunately, I decided to just do it by a random roll because I couldn't see why they wouldn't do it, and they ended up staying here, so no gameplay problem there. But I was wrong about that. This leader never could have possibly even moved over into Atrebates because it was under Roman control. I'll move that back to where it was. There we go. So on to the next card. It's Germanic Horse, and the Belgic tribes are up first. They're first eligible. So let's see what they want to do. So first priority, Ambiorix or 4+ Belgic warbands where non-German enemy has an ally, citadel, legion, or 4+ pieces. Okay, so that's not true. Ambiorix is here, and the only other space that has 4 or more warbands would be the Nervii region. Neither of those regions have non-German enemies with an ally or a legion or a citadel. Okay, so that's no. Next, the Belgae first on upcoming but not current card, and roll a 1 to 4. I forgot to reveal the next card. Okay, so they are they're first on this card, so it doesn't even matter. They're not first on that card. It doesn't matter. Okay, so they're not first on the upcoming card. Okay, so no. Okay, Belgae by sequence of play may use the event. Yes. Event ineffective or capability in the final year or no Belgae. Okay, let's check that out. Okay, it is a capability, but this is not the final year. And we don't have the no Belgae symbol, so they will consider this. Okay. So we look at the shaded region. Oh, yeah, okay. Shock cavalry. If Gallic, take this card. Each battle command, you double enemies' losses in one region, unless defender with fort or citadel. Okay, so that would be effective. Capability that the Belgians would rather like, I should think. Okay, well then, the event is effective. It's not a capability of final year. Doesn't have the no Belgae symbol, so no. So they'll take the event. Okay, so the Belgae have taken that event, the Germanic horse. I always like to indicate anything special going on with commands or special abilities by putting a little chunk of sticky note next to it. Just remind me there's something going on with that, and I can remember to check around and remind myself what it is. Otherwise, I'm liable to forget it. Okay, and so the Belgae took the event, so the Aedui are up next, and they can do a full command and special ability. So let's see what the Aedui want to do. Are they first on the upcoming but not the current card? No, they're not first on the next card. The Romans are. They cannot use the event because it's gone, so no. Battle would force a loss on enemy leader, ally, citadel, or legion. Okay, let's check that out. So just looking at the battle procedures to remind me how this goes. And also remembering that Diviciacus is in play. So that means that the Aedui could use Roman auxilia as if they were Aedui warbands. So long as the Romans agree to that. And we do have the Romans, the Roman bot does have some instructions on this. So during Aedui commands, agree to Diviciacus, that is to say, agree to the Aedui using their auxilia as Aedui warbands, but not if they are raiding or battling the Romans. Okay, well that makes good sense. But otherwise they will agree. And during Roman commands, because the Romans can also use the Aedui warbands as auxilia during their commands, use the warbands as able but recruit none, and during Aedui defense do not agree. Okay, so they're not going to help defend the Aedui, but they will help the Aedui with their commands as long as they're not raiding or battling the Romans. And the Romans will try to use the Aedui as much as they can as well, but they won't recruit any of them. Okay, so so given the state of the board, the only battling that could go on here that would even possibly affect an ally, a citadel, a legion, or a leader, I think. Is that all the things? Leader, ally, citadel, or legion, yeah. So the only battles that could possibly do that would be either here in Berturges, where there's a citadel, or here in Mandubii, where there's a citadel and an ally. Nothing else where there are, nothing else where there are Aedui pieces would work. I mean, there's not enough pieces here to do anything, because this would only count for half, rounded down, so that would be 0. So this wouldn't be able to do any damage at all. Same thing up here, this lone warrior would not be able to do any damage at all. Alright, so these are the only two possibilities, but neither one of those is really going to work. Each of these counts as half, rounded down, so this would just be 1 damage this would be able to do. And because there's a citadel, that would be rounded down anyway. Well, sorry, that would be cut in half and rounded down, so that would become 0. So this wouldn't do any damage at all. Here, at least they could do some damage. They'd be able to do 2, and the citadel would cut that in half. They'd be able to do 1 damage, but there's plenty of warbands to absorb that before it would even come close to touching the citadel or the ally. Alright, so the answer to this is no. They just do not have enough firepower right now to force any kind of loss on a leader, ally, citadel, or legion. Okay, so no. Next thing, 0 to 4 Aedui warbands on map, or rally would place citadel, ally, or greater than 3 pieces. So let's check that out. So the answer to this question is no. There are more than 4 Aedui warbands on the map, and rally wouldn't place any citadels or allies because they simply don't have control of a space with a subdued tribe. The only control they have is here in Berturges, and there's no subdued tribes there, so they can't place any. And they don't have any allies in cities, so they can't place any citadels either. And they wouldn't place more than 3 pieces because the only warbands they could place would be in Mandubii. They could place 1 because of the ally, and here in Aedui they could place 1 because of the citadel, also because it's their home region. Either way, that's only 2, and that's the best they could do with rally. So the answer is no. Okay, Aedui have 0 to 3 resources. Yeah, they only have 1 resource right now. So let's see what they roll. They roll a 4. So the answer to that will be yes. They have 0 to 3 resources, and they rolled a 1 to 4. Okay, so they're going to try to raid if they would gain 2 or more resources total. So let's try to figure that out. Okay, so raid says you can the Aedui can do it in any regions with hidden Aedui. Okay, and remember they can also use Auxilia potentially if they were within 1 region of Divikiakis. Okay, it doesn't cost anything, but they reveal 1 to 2 hidden Aedui per region. For each, either add 1 resource, not devastated, or take 1 resource from a faction that has no citadel or fort. Okay, so they can only steal from a faction that has no citadel or fort. That really limits them. Pretty much everywhere you're going to find citadels or forts. So the Arverni have a citadel there, the Belga have a citadel there, the Arverni have a citadel there, the Romans have a fort there, the Romans have a fort here. The only place that's not true where there are some Aedui warbands is here in Belgica. So they could potentially steal from the Belgians there. But otherwise, every place else is protected with a citadel or fort. Okay, so looking at the priorities here for the bot, only going to do this if they can gain 2 or more resources. I think that's not going to be a problem. So first versus players at 0+ victory margin. Well, the Belgians are at 0+ victory. They're past victory, as a matter of fact. They're at 17, and their victory condition is 16 or greater. So they are actually at victory. Remember, 0+ victory means at victory conditions or just 1 away, because that's 0. 1 away is actually 0. All right, so they're going to do that here. They're going to go ahead and steal 1 resource from the Belgic tribes. So I'll take 1 resource from them. Okay, so that's the only faction they can actually steal from. So the second one is irrelevant. Versus other non-Roman enemies. No, they're not going to be able to steal from anybody else, including the Romans, actually. So next, in non-devastated regions versus no faction only. Okay, so they're going to be able to get quite a few resources from that. So the Aedui were able to get 6 resources from that, not stealing from other factions, but rather, I don't know, I guess taking from local regional tribes. So they revealed 1 or 2 in each area they could to get the most out of it they could, which is 6. Couldn't do it here in the Aedui region because those warbands were already revealed. Okay, so that's the raid. The Aedui would like to use a special ability. So from raid, we carry on here to trade. We have some conditions to meet first. So the Aedui battled? No. Or their resources are 0 to 9? Yes, they're at 8. I'm curious about the way they write that. I mean, why don't they just say 9 or less than 10 or something? You know, they don't seem to be consistent in the way they write numbers. Anyway, 0 to 9, fine. They're at 8, so that is true. Or they do in Roman resources less than 15. That's also true. Okay, so one of those is true. And Aedui are second eligible. Yes, they are. So that's also true. So both of these are true. So they will trade. Trade for all resources possible. Players must now agree or not. Non-player Romans agree. Okay, so the non-player Romans are automatically going to agree. We know that the other factions will all not agree. So let's take a look at trade. They could use this with any command, location, regions within supply lines. So we do need to figure out the supply lines. Factions agree to supply line or not. In supply lines, add +1 Aedui resources, +2 if Romans agreed. For each Aedui ally in Citadel, each subdued tribe under Aedui control. And if Romans agreed, each Roman ally under Aedui control. Okay, so the Romans agree to supply. Also, we have to remember that because Divikiakis is in play, the special abilities are restricted to just within 1 space of where Divikiakis is. That's the trade-off for being able to use, for the Romans and Aedui being able to use each other's pieces. Okay, so taking a look at the spaces immediately around Diviciacus, including the space he is in, there's only one space that actually qualifies for trade, and that would be the Idui region. Every other region either doesn't have citadels or allies or subdued tribes under Idui control, or it's not within supply. One or the other. Okay, so just that one is going to get them 2 resources. By the way, it's worth noting, you might think, well, what about this region over here? It's under Roman control, sure, but if the Idui use those auxilia as their own pieces, then it becomes Idui controlled, right? Because that would be 7 Idui pieces there, so that would be Idui control. But no, that's not how that works. The Idui and the Romans can't use each other's pieces for the purposes of determining control. That's still done with their own pieces. All right, so they do not have control there. If they did, they could count the subdued tribe and that Roman ally as 2 each, but they can't do that. Okay, so they only get 2 for this Idui citadel over here. All right, on to the next card. It's Pompey, Caesar's old frenemy, and the Romans are up first, and they are eligible. So let's see what they want to do. Before moving on, I just want to take stock of the state of the game, because this game is shaping up to in a very interesting way, and kind of classically, I would say. So just looking at how things are, the Belgians are very strong, under the leadership of Ambiorix. They have a lot of allies in the north. Obviously, they have their German cousins over here that can come to their aid from the east. And right now, they are at their victory condition. They are winning the game, for sure. They're very powerful in the north. And so the question is, all right, how does anyone compete with that? Well, we've got Vercingetorix down here with the Arverni, And Vercingetorix likes to build a huge army and then kind of make a big push. That's kind of his main strategy, it seems. So he's down here building up his army. But the question is, will it be too late by the time he's able to build the army as big as he wants? Okay. Perhaps. And the Romans, they're quite strong, of course, with their legions and all. But the problem for them, and they could definitely make a dent in the Belgians. They're coming up here, basically on the west, on the east flank, and also on the west flank over here, and even up in Britannia. They could come in this way, and they could come in this way. So it seems like they're sort of surrounding the Belgians. Okay, but the problem is they're very poor now. They have hardly any resources. So they don't have the resources to make a big push. The Idui, militarily they're quite weak. They don't have the firepower to go up against the Belgians for sure. But on the other hand, they could provide financial support, right, to the Romans at least. Probably not to the Arverni, but they could provide financial support to the Romans. And try to beat back the Belgians that way. So it's kind of it's kind of where you would expect the game to go, really, at this point. The Romans are going to have to rely on some friends in Gaul, namely the Idui in this case, to provide them with some resources. The Belgians in the north and the Germans are quite strong. They're not going to be easy to defeat. And the Arverni Confederation down here would like to form a resistance, and they can, given enough time. They have to build the support they need. They can do it, but they need time to do it. It's not clear they're going to have enough time before the game's over and they've lost. So it's very interesting the way the game has led us to this point. Okay, so the Romans are up. Let's see what they do. Caesar or legion with enemy ally, citadel, leader, or control, or where enemy battle or rampage now would force loss on legion or Caesar. Okay, let's check that. So the answer is clearly no. Caesar's over here, and there's no enemy allies or citadels or leaders or enemy control, and there's no way a battle or a rampage could cause any loss on Caesar there. All the legions are over here and neither one of those have any enemies at all. Okay, so the answer is no. Next, enemy adds 0 plus victory. Yes, the Belgians, for sure. And Caesar with legions and 4 plus auxilia. Well, the Belgians are at victory, but the problem is Caesar is not with any of his legions. He's had a very hard time getting together with his legions. So, no, that's not true. Okay, so no. Romans by sequence of play may use the event. Yes, okay. Yeah, they could use the event. So we need to check and see if the event is effective. Okay, so the card says, Consul supports Gaul campaign. If adulation, place 1 legion in Provincia. If not, shift the Senate 1 box down toward adulation. Well, it is not at adulation right now. It is at intrigue. So this would cause the Roman Senate to move to adulation, which would allow these other legions to come out on the board. Okay, well, that is effective. Okay, so let's see if Caesar wants it. Okay, so the event is effective. It's not a capability in the final year. It doesn't have no Romans on it. Okay, so the answer is no. All right, they're just going to take it. So the Senate is now giving full-throated support to Caesar and Gaul. Okay, thanks to good old Pompey. All right, so the Arverni are next, and they can take a full command in special activity. All right, so let's check out what the Arverni will do. Vercingetorix or 10 plus Arverni warbands where Romans or Aedui have an ally citadel legion or greater than 3 pieces. No, that's not true. The only place where Vercingetorix or greater than 3 warbands are is down here, and there's only one lonely Aedui warband down there. Not much of a threat. Okay, so no. Arverni by the sequence of play may use the event. No. We'll follow that line. 0 to 8 Arverni warbands on the map. No, way more than that. Or rally would place 2 or more allies citadels. No, that's not true. Everywhere the Arverni have control is already maxed out on allies and citadels. Or 6 or more pieces. That is true. They definitely would place 6 or more pieces with rally, because they could place pieces there and pieces here, of course, and they've got still a bunch of warbands sitting over there. Okay, so it looks like Vercingetorix is going to stay firm in his dedication to building a massive army, well, 2 massive armies, really, and go ahead and rally. All right, so let's take a look at rally action. They can do this anywhere, but if it's devastated only with Vercingetorix, no devastation. They have to pay 1 resources per region. Okay. Each region, if Arverni controller Vercingetorix, place an ally. Okay, they don't have room for any allies. Or if Arverni leader, ally, or citadel, place warbands equal to their number plus 1. Okay, they can do that. Or if Arverni ally and city, replace with a citadel, can't do that. Or if Arverni home region, place a warband. Vercingetorix places allied citadels plus warbands. Okay, so looking at the priorities here for rally, they'd like to do citadels first, can't do that. Then allies second, can't do that. So now place the most warbands. Okay, so down here they can place 1, 2, 3, 4, plus 1 is 5. So they'll place 5 Arverni warbands there to add to that massive army. And here they can place 1, 2, 3. So they'll place 3 there. Okay, so they ended up placing 8 total. And that will cost them 2 resources. So they're down to 3 now. So the Arverni would like to use a special ability now. So we'll follow the line. They'd like to devastate. The problem with that is that, again, they can only do it within 1 region of Vercingetorix. Okay, so it has to be near the Arverni home area. And if they do it, they have to remove 1 in 4 of their own warbands in order to force other factions in the area to remove 1 in 3 of theirs. And that's just a very bad deal for them down here. They'd have to remove a bunch of theirs to only get rid of 1. Actually, they wouldn't even get rid of that 1, would they? Because it would be 1 in 3 rounded down, so that would actually be 0. Okay, so all they would do is make their own lives hard. Okay, so they don't want to do that. So they'd rather entreat, which allows them to, here, okay, it has to be a region with hidden Arverni, and within one region of Vercingetorix or the successor. Okay, so again, that's only this region. There are no regions surrounding it that are that have any hidden Arverni. Okay, you have to pay for this. Interestingly, it costs a resource to do this. Replace either one warband or exilia, or if Arverni control one Gallic or German ally, not Citadel or Roman ally, there with its Arverni counterpart. So they could replace that one Idui with an Arverni. Let's see if they want to do that. Okay, replace enemy allies with Arverni. Okay, no allies there. Replace other enemies with Arverni. Okay, first auxilia, there are none. Then Idui warbands. Okay, so they will do this. They will convert that Idui there into a Arverni. And they have to pay a resource to do that. Alright, that's the end of the turn for the Arverni. So, on to the next card. The next card is Litavicus, and the Idui are first eligible. So they will go first. Okay, so, first on upcoming but not current card. They're actually first on both, so no. They can use the event, yes. Now we need to check and see if it is effective. Okay, so the Idui like the shaded, or the unshaded, don't they? Yeah, they like unshaded. Okay. Arverni plot thwarted. In each of two regions, replace up to 2 Arverni warbands with Idui warbands. 4 Arverni resources to the Idui. Well, that would definitely be effective. The Idui would like that. Okay, so they're probably going to want it. So the answer to this is no. So, yeah, they're going to take it. Well, there were only 2 spaces on the board that even had Arverni warbands, so the Idui removed 2 from each one and put 2 of their own in there. And the Arverni only had 2 resources left, so the Idui took those 2. So the Arverni are now broke, and they lost 4 warbands. So not great for the Arverni there, but pretty good for the Idui. Okay, so that's it. That's the event. So the Belgians are up next. They can use a full command and special activity. So let's see what the Belgians want to do. So Ambiorix or 4+ Belgic warbands where a non-German enemy has an ally citadel, legion, or 4 or more pieces. That's still a no. There's only 2 places where that would matter. Ambiorix is here. There's 4 more warbands there, but in neither place do we see ally citadel, legions, or greater than 4 pieces. Okay. So no. Alright. Belgai first on upcoming, but not on the current card. No, they are not first on the next card. Okay. They could use the event. Nope, the event's gone. Rally would add Belgic ally, citadel, 3 or more Belgic warbands, or Belgic control. Yeah, Rally would add an ally. Rally would add an ally, I should say, here in Atrabates. That's a subdued tribe. They have control there. So yeah, Rally would add an ally. Alright, so that's what they're going to want to do. They're going to do wherever able to place a piece. Replace a city with a citadel. They don't have any citadels left. Place all allies able. Okay, so they'll want to place an ally here. Let's see, it's going to cost them 1 resource, 2 if outside Belgica, as long as there's no devastation. If Belgic control, place a Belgic ally at a subdued tribe. Okay, so they can do that. They'll put an ally right there and pay 1 resource for that. Okay. Don't think they're going to be able to place any more allies. They need control to do it. No, they don't have control anywhere else they can place an ally. Okay, or if Belgic allies in Citadel, place warbands equaling up to their number. Well, the Belgians don't have any more warbands, so they can't do that. Or if Belgic allied city, place ally with a Citadel, can't do that. They don't have any more Citadels. Or if region in Belgica, place a warband, can't do that because they don't have any more warbands. Alright, so not much action there. But I think the Belgians are like, you know what, let's just sit tight. Let the Romans come to us, you know. Okay. So they did this rally action. Okay. So now they would like to rampage. So let's check that out. So looking at the rampage action, it can be done in any region with hidden Belgic warbands and within one region of Ambiorix or with a successor. Okay, well that narrows it down quite a bit. I mean, Ambiorix is here. There are no hidden warbands in his area. There are hidden warbands in a couple of adjacent areas. These three here. But that's it. So just these three are the only ones we could consider here. Okay, it says a faction, not Germans, nor any with a leader, citadel, or fort, either removes or retreats one of its warbands. Well, the only factions in that area are Germans, so not them. And also there's some Romans, but there's a fort there. So, no. Alright, so no rampage is going to happen. So we'll carry on. If not that, then enlist. Okay, so the Belgians are trying to enlist the aid of the Germans here. But it's not going to work. Let's see why that's the case. Okay, it says, if battle, enlist Germans as Belgae. Okay, there was no battle, so we skip that. If none, okay, meaning no battle, enlist after command to add a free German command in one region. Alright, and they can do that because enlist says regions within one of Germania or with Germanic pieces, and within one region of Ambiorix or with his successor. And the procedure is either treat Germanic war bands there as Belgic for this command, including for control. Okay, so that would be, the bot would want to battle with that bit. Or if not that, then execute a free Germanic command in one region. So that's what the Belgae are trying to do right now. Alright, well there's only 3 regions that qualify here. They have to be within one of Germania or have German pieces. So just these 3 areas here. Well, they also have to be within one of Ambiorix. That's the other key. Okay, so they have to be sort of in the middle here. So Germania's too far away, can't go there, and too far away from Ambiorix. And this space here, although it's adjacent to Germania, is also too far away. So it's got to be one of these 3. Okay, so now let's see if they'll select any of them. So first they'd like to battle if able to cause an enemy loss. Well, the only place they could battle, obviously they're not going to choose to battle the Belgae, that would be stupid. So the only other faction around that they could battle would be the Romans right here. So these 2 German warbands could attack the Romans there. But the problem is, the German warbands cause half a loss each. Defender removes 1 piece per loss, half that if a citadel or fort, rounded down. So these would only cause 1 loss, and then that would be halved because of the fort. So it would be, and so that'd be half, and then rounded down be 0. So they wouldn't be able to cause a loss there at all. All right, and that is that means this won't do anything. Battle if able to cause enemy loss. Okay, they're not able to cause enemy loss. So next, march. 2+ and the most Germans able. Alright, well there's 2 places they could march from. So let's see if they'll do that. From Belgica or Germania to Roman, Aedui, or Arverni control. Okay, so from Belgica or Germanica. Okay, so not this one. This is not in either Belgica or Germanica. So only those 2 would qualify under this priority. And they want to march them to Roman, Aedui, or Arverni control. And there's just no way they could get there from there. There's no adjacent region that would be under the control of any of those factions. Okay, so let's try the next one. They could march in place in order to remove scouted or to hide. Well, these warbands are already hidden, so that doesn't do anything. Okay, let's try the next thing. They'd like to rally to place a peace. First an ally, then the most warbands able. Okay, well, rallying for them says, in each region, if Germanic control, place a Germanic ally at a subdued tribe. Well, there's no Germanic control in any of those places, and there are no subdued tribes anyway. Then also place Germanic warbands in each region up to the number of Germanic allies there. Well, there aren't any Germanic allies there either, so they wouldn't be able to place any any warbands. Then it says, or if Germania and no Germanic ally place a warband. Okay, well, none of this is in Germania. Okay, so rallying does nothing as well. So last chance, maybe a raid to take some resources from a player. So again, only the Romans would be eligible for this. But when we look at raid, the location, any region with hidden Germans and with Romans with no fort, or Gauls with no citadel. Okay, so the fort there is protecting the Romans once again. All right then, nothing worked here. So if none, no special ability. So all the Belgians did that turn was place an ally here at Atrebates. That's it. Spent one resource. So again, I think they're like, you know, we'll wait for them to come to us, you know. They didn't even enlist the Germans. They're like, you know what, just hang back. Don't worry. We're in a good position. We'll wait for them to come to us. Don't worry about that Roman fort over there. It's fine. It'll be fine. All right, so that's the end of that round. On to the next one. The next card is Roman Wine. And the Romans will be up first. So first we check if Caesar or legions are with an enemy allied citadel leader or control, or where enemy battle or rampage now would force loss on legion or Caesar. The answer to that is still no. The legions aren't with any enemies at all. Caesar's over here. Some enemies, but inconsequential, not allied citadels or control. Okay, so next, enemy adds 0 plus victory. Yeah, the Belgians are still at 0 plus victory. And Caesar with legions and 4 or more auxilia. No, Caesar still can't get his act together and get with his legions, so no. Romans by the sequence of play may use the event. Yeah, sure. So now we have to read it, see what it says. All right, Roman wine. Luxury good. Remove either up to any 4 allied tribes under Roman control, or up to 2 adjacent to Roman control. Okay, remove either up to any 4 allied tribes under Roman control. Okay, interesting. Or up to 2 adjacent to Roman control. All right, we'll have to look into that. Well, the Romans only control one space that even has non-Roman allies, and that would be here in Idui. There's an Idui ally there, but it's a citadel. And we're specifically told by this card, not citadels. All right, so this being able to get rid of 4 allied tribes under Roman control, that's not going to work. So they could do the other one, though. They could take up to 2 adjacent to Roman control. Oh, okay, so they could get rid of some allies adjacent to Roman control, and that would be... They could take out 2 Belgian allies, because that would be adjacent to the Sequani region here, which is under Roman control. They could take out the Treveri ally and the Ubii ally, which I assume is probably what they'd want to do to try to get that Belgian victory condition down. Okay, so this is in fact an effective event. It's not a capability. It doesn't say no Roman. Okay, so they will take it. So I've marked all the spaces on the map with these gray pawns where there are allies that could be removed by this event. Okay, so they have to be adjacent to Roman control, and we're only looking at allies. We're not looking at citadels. Okay, so even way up here in Belgica, this is a possible space because it's adjacent to Britannia, which has Roman control. Okay, now we need to figure out what the bot will actually choose here. Of course, the smart thing to do would be to choose 2 Belgian allies, get rid of them, get the Belgian victory condition down. But I actually don't think that's what they're going to do, interestingly. So, trying to figure out the priorities here, I went to the rules. Okay, so we have event-driven actions here, 8.2.3. It says, unless non-player instructions for given event specify otherwise, you do it according to these priorities. Okay, well, this is the interesting one. It says, within the above, if applicable, select event spaces to ensure that as many legions, then citadels, then allies, then other pieces as possible are placed, removed, or replaced. All right, well, that's easy enough. We're definitely going to get rid of 2 allies here. Okay, you could take it from any of these spaces that I've marked. But here's the interesting bit. Within that, use the priorities in 8.4.1. All right, so if we go to 8.4.1, placing, moving, and removing pieces. All right, so unless otherwise specified, once spaces involved are selected, non-players as possible choose according to these priorities. So this is curious to me because over here it says select the event spaces to ensure that you're removing or replacing as much as possible, and within that use the priorities in 8.4.1. So that makes it sound like if there's any choice of which to select, go to 8.4.1. But then when you go to 8.4.1, it says once spaces involved are selected, 8.2.3, which is exactly what I was just reading, 8.2.3. So this, it seems like we have a circle going on here. So how do we resolve this? Do we select the spaces first? And this is just telling us, oh, once you've selected the spaces, then you have these priorities over here. Check those out to figure out what to do in those spaces. Or is this telling us that if there's some ambiguity about which spaces to choose, you can go over to 8.4.1 to try to resolve that. But once we go to 8.4.1, it says once spaces involved are selected. So that makes it sound like, no, no, no. The spaces are supposed to be already selected before we look at this. Okay, and this matters because if we look at this, so if we take the interpretation where this is telling us, okay, if there's some question about what spaces to select, go look over here and use these priorities. If we do it that way, we'll find that the Romans are not going to select any Belgians. That's because, right here, this bullet point, if Belgae or Averni target the Romans, then the Aedui, then each other, then the Germans. If Roman or Aedui target the Arverni, then the Belgae, then Germans, then each other. So this is telling us the Romans and the Aedui target the Arverni first, before they target the Belgae. So if we did it that way, then the Romans would want to get rid of some of these Arverni allies, and they would ignore the Belgic allies. Right, if we did it by that interpretation. On the other hand, if we're not supposed to do that, and we're not supposed to go over here and look at these instructions until after we've selected spaces, and this sentence is merely meant to tell us, okay, after the spaces are selected, to figure out what to do in those spaces, go over there, if that's the way we're supposed to read it, then this next thing comes into play. When a non-player executing an event has a choice that is not otherwise prioritized, choose randomly. So if we did it that way, then there's a random chance that the Romans could select some Belgic tribes. In fact, probably more likely that they would because there's more of them. So randomly choosing would be a good chance that they would choose them. So it's not clear to me exactly how to interpret that. So I've had to think about it. Even tried to look up some answers to this, see if anybody else had the same question, but this is a very hard thing to search, so I wasn't able to really find anything. But here's what I think. Given that the way this is set up, you know, right, executing events, we have general instructions, and then we have some event-driven action instructions. Then we have a whole section on selecting regions, tribes, or targets. Before we get to the other guidelines that involve placing, moving, or removing pieces. And since it specifically says there once pieces involved are selected, I think we're supposed to have that already figured out before we get there. So this, you know, this sentence here that seems to suddenly point over there and say, go over there and use that to decide this, strikes me as a bit of an odd way to do this. If they meant for these priorities over here to be useful for making a decision over here, then those guidelines should have been over here before all this other stuff happened. So I don't think that's the way we're supposed to read it. I think it's just telling us that once once you've selected the regions and targets, then you're going to go over there and do that. But first you have to select the regions, tribes, or targets, which happens here. Okay, so I think that's the way you're supposed to read it. That's a very confusing sentence, but I think that's it. So we really should be looking here, selecting regions, tribes, or targets, to figure out what to do. Okay, so this tells us to use the command and special ability priorities when we can. Okay, but we're not doing a command or special ability, so that doesn't work. So use the flowcharts in there. Or use specific event instructions. Well, the event doesn't give us specific instructions. And otherwise, general event guidelines above. Okay, we just looked there as applicable. That didn't really do it. Do so for each individual listed priority in order until there are no more legal candidates or actions for that priority, or until any space limit within that priority is reached. Then move on to the next priority and do the same until any overall limit for the command or special ability is reached, or until the faction runs out of resources if applicable. Okay, again, we're not doing a command or special ability here, so this is not helpful. Okay, we're doing an event. Okay, sometimes priorities will provide a precedence of what should be selected first. If not, select equal candidates randomly per below. Okay, so that's probably what we're going to end up doing. Okay, but we do have event location selection. Within above guidelines for event-driven actions and event instructions, that's what we were just looking at, 8.2.3, this stuff. So within those guidelines, non-players select event regions and tribes, including for use of capabilities, to benefit themselves first, then to ensure that event text places the most own or removes or replaces the most enemy legions, then citadels, then allies, then other pieces possible, net by faction, then randomly. Unless otherwise specified, carry out actions as fully as possible in the selected region before moving on to select others. Okay, well, two things. Obviously, we're going to remove 2. That's already clear, so it's fine. But I wonder what net by faction means. I wonder if, it seems to me that that would mean that once you've selected one faction, then you remove 2 allies from that faction, because that would be a net of 2 for that faction, rather than splitting it between 2. If you took one ally away from one faction, one from another, that'd be 1 each, whereas you could get a net of 2 per faction, by faction, if you remove 2 from the same. So, I'm not sure if that's right, but it seems to me like that's the way to read net by faction. Okay, then randomly. Alright, so it makes it sound like what we're going to do is choose a faction randomly and then remove 2 of their allies. And we'd probably have to choose where they come from randomly too, if there's a choice. Alright, then there's a section on placing leaders, a section on using capabilities, and here's random selection. So looks like that's what's going to happen. It's going to be random. Alright, anyway, that's the way I'm going to read it. So I'm going to make a random selection from these factions and remove 2 allies. Okay, well, they couldn't target the Germans or the Aedui because they would only be able to take out 1 ally in either case. That wouldn't be the maximum they could do. So they won't do that. So it's either going to be the Belgians or the Arverni. So I rolled a die, 1, 2, 3 for the Belgians, 4, 5, 6 for the Arverni, and the roll was 4. Okay. So the Romans are going to target the Arverni. They have 3 possibilities. There's 1 there, and there's 2 down here. So they're going to roll on those. So they ended up removing both of the allies from down here in the Arverni region. And they can do that because it's adjacent to Roman control. Okay, so that's the Romans using their event. The Arverni are up next. They can do a full command and special ability. So let's see what they'll do. Okay, Vercingetorix or 10 plus Arverni warbands where Romans or Aedui have an ally citadel legion or greater than 3 pieces. No, that's still not true. The only place where there's at least 10 warbands is down here with Vercingetorix, and there's no ally citadels, legions, or leaders. Okay, so that's a no. Alright, Arverni by sequence of play may use the event. No, it's already gone. 0 to 8 Arverni warbands on the map. No. Or rally would place 2 or more allies, citadels, or 6 or more pieces. Well, Rally would place an ally because they just had 2 removed there, but it would not place 2. Okay, so that part's a no. It place 2 allies, or 6 plus pieces. Well, I don't think it would place 6 plus pieces because they would place an ally for sure here. That would be 1 piece, and then they would have to. Then the only thing they could do is place warbands there, which would be 3. So that'd be a total of only 4 pieces. So no, they're not gonna rally. Interestingly. Okay, so next is 0 to 5 Arverni citadels, or allies plus citadels on the map. That's right, there's 3, or 6 plus warbands available. There are more than 6 warbands available. There's 7. Okay, so the answer is yes, they are going to march. But I forgot something about Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix actually gets to place allies or citadel and warbands when he rallies. So actually in this space, since Vercingetorix is there, they'd be able to place an ally and be able to place warbands. So they could put an ally there and then place 1, 2... Does that ally count when placing warbands? Not sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7. Yeah, they could put all their warbands in then. Okay, so I was wrong about that. Let's go back. So the answer to this is actually yes. They could place more than 6 pieces. Okay, so they're going to rally. Well, according to the rule book here, this is a note under rally for Vercingetorix. It says, the Arverni may rally even in a devastated region if that region has Vercingetorix. Arverni rally in a region that has Vercingetorix may place an ally, even without Arverni control. Finally, it may place either an ally or a citadel, and also place warbands, in either order. Placement must otherwise be per the above procedures. Okay, so it says I can do it in either order. So, if to place the ally first, then apparently they could use that ally to add to the number of warbands that they do. So essentially do like this. Place the ally, and now they'll place warbands, so this counts as 1. 1, 2, 3, plus 1 is 4. So they'll place 4 warbands there. I guess that's right. But we do have a different problem that I forgot about, and that's the Arverni are broke. So never mind. They're not going to do this. That would cost them money. Okay, so they were going to rally. Okay, so their flowchart takes them to rally. They can't do it because they're broke. So none. They'd like to march, but marching costs money too, so they can't do that. So they'd like to raid. Makes sense. They'd like to get some resources. So they'll try to do that. Okay, so raid says it can be done in any region with hidden Arverni. So there are 2 such regions. They reveal 1 or 2 hidden Arverni per region. And for each, they either add 1 resource, not devastated, or take a resource from a faction that has no citadel or fort. Alright, so we have these 2 regions where the Arverni are. They have underground hidden warbands there, and the Aedui are in each space, so they could steal from the Aedui. And the Aedui do not have a citadel in either place. So that's where we stand, and let's see what the instructions say. If would gain 2 or more resources total. Yeah, definitely would. Versus factions, Romans, Aedui, Belgium. Okay, so they want to they want to target the Aedui. Okay, so revealed 4 total warbands and stole 4 resources from the Aedui. Okay, they'd like to choose a special ability now. Devastate is what they'd like to do, but they have the same problem that they usually do, and that's that they can only devastate within one. They can only do a special ability within 1 region of Vercingetorix, so it would have to be in this area, and it has to be Arverni controlled as well. So the only region that would count is this one. And they obviously don't want to devastate here because that would hurt them a lot more than it would hurt the Aedui here. So they're not going to do that. Okay, so they'd like to enlist, entreat instead, to replace enemy allies with Arverni. No, there are no allies there, but they could replace other enemies with Arverni. Okay, so they could replace one of these Idui. So let's see how that works. Regions with hidden Arverni, yes, and within one region of Vercingetorix, so with the successor, yes. It'll cost them a resource. It's okay, they have some resources now. Replace either one warband or auxilia, or if Arverni control, one Gallic or German ally, not Citadel or Roman ally, with its Arverni counterpart. Okay, so they can do that here. They'll take away one of those and put in another one of theirs. Okay, and that will cost them one resource to do so. Okay, that's the end of that card, and the next card revealed a winter quarters coming up. So we have a frost condition here, no marching allowed for this turn. So the card is Celtic Rites, and the Idui will be up first. I do want to point out, winter quarters is coming up next, and the Belgians are still at victory. They're beyond their victory conditions. So unless something happens this turn, and looks like the Idui are the only ones who could do it, looks like the Belgians are going to win. Okay, so the Idui seem to be the last hope to keep the Belgians from winning. So let's see what they do. Alright, Idui first on upcoming but not the current card. Well, the next card is Winter Quarters, so it doesn't have an order. And they're first on this card anyway. They could use the event by sequence of play? Sure. Event ineffective or capable in final year or no Idui. Well, let's check it out. Okay, so we do have the laurels here, so special instructions. And in this case, I want to look at that first because the special instructions for this card. Let's see, this is called Celtic Rites. Here it is, Celtic Rites. So it's in this group of cards. It says, use the shaded text. You have Remy Influence and Remy blah blah blah. Okay, this isn't Remy Influence. Okay, but they're going to use the shaded text. That's the important thing. So we're not going to read that, we're going to read this. Okay, the Immortal Gods Propitiated. A Gallic faction executes a free command in multiple regions. Stay eligible. Oh, interesting. So it could be the Arverni launch an attack against the Belgians. That could be interesting. I doubt the Arverni will want to do that, just because, you know, it's not their style. But let's see. Well, I forgot about this issue. So whenever there's a choice of who gets benefits, a faction always chooses themselves only. So if they're going to choose a Gallic faction here to get free command, it's going to be themselves. Okay. So it's not ineffective, it's not a capable of final year, it's not no Idui, so they will take it. But they will use the shaded text. So the Idui are going to get a free command here. So we're going to go down their flowchart and find out which command they'd like to do. Okay, so battle would force a loss on enemy leader, ally, citadel, or legion. No, the Idui are really in no position to cause losses on anything like that. The only thing that comes close is maybe Mandubii here, but they could do 1, 2, 3.5, cause 3.5 losses, but they would cut that in half because of the citadel, so that would just be 1, rounding down, be 1. So there's no way they're going to get through all those warbands to get to the allies of citadel. Okay, so no. 0 to 4 Idui warbands on the map. No, there's more than that. Or rally would place citadel, ally, or greater than 3 pieces. Or sorry, 3 or more pieces. Rally would place a citadel? No, I don't think so. Would it place an ally? No. Would it place more than 3 pieces? No, it wouldn't. Okay. So that's no. So I don't think it would. See, rally. Okay. If allies and citadels place warbands up to their number. Okay, so they'd only be able to place 2. No. So no. Do we have 0 to 3 resources? No, they have more than that. Okay, so they'd like to march. Leave one IDUI warband per region, lose no control. Move from one region to add one hidden IDUI up to 3 regions where none. So let's look at the march command here. So they can do it in regions with IDUI warbands. It would normally cost them a resource per region, but they're doing this for free because of the event. They'll move the warbands as desired to adjacent regions and or flip them to hidden or remove scouted. If moving into or out of Britannia, no special ability. Alright. So they're going to choose a region to add one hidden IDUI to up to 3 regions where there are none. First to an enemy, ally, or citadel, then to those of enemies with most allies and citadels. Okay, so because they wanted to prioritize the enemy with the most allies and citadels, that means they were prioritizing the Belgic tribes, naturally. So the only way they could move to spaces with Belgic tribes that did not already have an underground IDUI would be to move from Mandubii here, where they had 3 underground, 3 hidden warbands. So they moved one over here to Treveri, another up here to Atrebates, and so that's where the Belgic tribes were. And then they had one left that they could move, so they could move over here to Carnutes that has one Roman ally, or Sequani over here that has a Roman ally. Neither one had an underground IDUI, so they chose randomly between those and ended up sending the third one over here to Carnutes. Okay, so that gets this one. So move from one region to add one hidden IDUI to up to 3 regions where none, and those are the priorities. Okay, so next, move to add IDUI control to one region with the fewest warbands needed. Well, the only way they could do this is to move the remaining 4 warbands here from Mandubii to Treveri, and that would take control of that space and take it away from the Belgians too. There's nothing else they could do that would add enough pieces, I don't think. Well, let's see. They could move from multiple regions, couldn't they? If they move these 3, 7... No, that would... no, they could take control here, couldn't they? There's 7 pieces there. So if they had 8, yeah. If they moved everything from here and there, they would lose control here. But nothing told us not to lose control. Okay, so they could take control of this space as well by moving from both Biterges and from Mandubii. That would do it as well. But we are told to do this with the fewest warbands needed. Okay, so they're going to do it with these. So they'll move these here. They get to flip them to hidden, which I'll do in a second. But that will remove Belgic control there and add IDUI control. That will actually put a small dent in the Belgic win conditions, but they're still above victory. So it's not going to be enough to stop them. Okay. I think that's all the all the IDUI get to do. So I just realized that we're under frost. There's not supposed to be any march. When the winter card is showing frost, no march. And so I was thinking, oh my gosh, everything I just did is ruined. But actually, no. I went to the rules. Check it out. Frost. Notes. Place the frost marker on the played event card as a reminder. Events may still allow march. Aha! So this is being done by the event. Well, sort of. I mean, it's allowing a free command. So, is that the event allowing the march? I mean, if it just said march, then I would say, okay, the event is allowing the march. But if it says free command, I wonder if that's still under the restrictions of frost or not. That's a good question. Well, I mean, it's kind of silly because obviously the Belgians are about to win. So trying to figure this out might seem a little silly, but I do like to get everything correct as much as I can. in as much as the rules make definite determinations. But this might be one of those ambiguous cases that the rules just don't have a very clear answer. And I've tried to look on Board Game Geek and other places, to look for answers, but I haven't been able to find anything definite. So here's the thing. The rules for Frost, I mean, it does say events may still allow March. Okay. And so if the event specifically said, it allows a faction to march, then that would be okay even during Frost. But this doesn't quite say that. It just says a Gallic faction executes a free command. So the question is, can that command be a march? On the one hand, it would be the event allowing it. On the other hand, it would still be the faction choosing it. So is it not allowed because the faction can't choose to march during a Frost? Or is it allowed because it's being given by an event rather than by command? Well, I think there is kind of an answer to this here. If we read this carefully. Okay, Frost. On the last event card before each winter card, commands by the sequence of play, including Germanic commands via Belgic enlist, may not use march. Okay, commands by the sequence of play. So I think that means commands chosen over here can't use march. That would be by the sequence of play. Okay, and then specifically it gives the note saying that events may still allow march. So I think the correct reading is that this is allowed. That this event is allowing the march. This is not a command by the sequence of play. This is a command by event, which is a different thing. And so that's allowed. Okay, anyway, I think that's the way I'm going to play it because I've already done it anyway. It doesn't much matter because the Belgians are still going to win. But I think I did it right based on that understanding of the rules. All right, so that would be an event for the Aedui. Now the Belgians get a turn before the winter. Okay, Ambiorix or 4+ Belgic warbands where non-German enemy has an allied citadel, legion, or 4 or more pieces. That's still no. Only 2 places have enough pieces or have Ambiorix there, and there's no non-German allied citadel, legion, or 4 or more pieces. Okay, so no. Belgai first on upcoming, but not on the current card. Okay, there is no upcoming card. It's winter. Belgai by sequence of play may use the event. No, they can't. Okay, Rally would add Belgic ally, citadel, 3 or more Belgic warbands, or Belgic control. Well, it wouldn't add a citadel. They don't have any more. Wouldn't add an ally because everywhere they have control already has. It's already full of allies. Would it add control? That's interesting. Maybe. Let's see. 1 resource per region, 2 if outside Belgium. In each region, if Belgic control, place an ally. If Belgic allies or citadel, place warbands equaling up to their number. Okay, allies or citadel. So they could put 1 here. That would not be enough to take control. They could put 1 here. That wouldn't be enough to take control. Okay, and they could put 1 here. That would make the Aedui lose control, but would not give the Belgians control. No, it wouldn't even do that. Would it? No, it would. It would make the Aedui lose control, but it wouldn't give them control. Okay. So I don't think they can get control. But would it place 3 or more Belgic warbands? Yeah, it probably would do. No, it wouldn't do that because the Belgians don't have any. Okay, so it won't do that either. So no, it won't do any of those things. The Belgai have 0 to 3 resources. No, they have way more than that, 15. So they would like to march. But you can't march because it's frost. So they would like to raid instead. If they would gain 2 or more resources, okay, versus players, they can, yeah, it looks like they can target the Dewey at least. Maybe the Romans too. Okay, so they're going to try to raid. Alright, so the Belgae stole some resources. They took 1 from the Aedui here, 2 from the Aedui there, 2 from the Romans up there, and then the Romans were out of money, so they couldn't take any more from the Romans, so they took another one from the Aedui here. Okay, except I just realized they can't take from the Romans there because the Romans have a fort. So the Romans get those 2 back. The Belgae still get 2 resources, they just can't take it from the Romans. Okay, so that does it for the raid. So now the Belgae would like to use a special ability. So they'd like to rampage with all warbands able to remove or retreat enemies. Okay, so rampage says they can do this in regions with hidden Belgic warbands and within 1 region of Ambiorix or with his successor. Okay, so it's got to be within 1 region of Ambiorix and has to have some hidden Belgic warbands. So it can't be either of these two places. These are the only 2 up here where this is possible, because there's some hidden warbands and they're within 1. There are no warbands down here. Alright, so one of those 2 places, obviously not Marini, there's no enemies there. So Nervii is the only option, but it's not going to work. A faction, not Germans, okay, so they can't target the Germans there, so now they can only target the Romans. Nor any with a leader, citadel, or fort. Well, they can't target the Romans either, because they have a fort. Okay, so no rampage, that's not going to work. So if none, they will enlist. They didn't battle, so they'd like to enlist this way. Add a free German command in 1 region. So once again, probably nothing's going to happen here, but let's go through it to make sure. There's only 3 places this can happen, because the space chosen has to be either within Germania or adjacent to it, and has to be within 1 of Ambiorix. So these 3 right here are the only ones that are possible. Okay, so they want to try and battle first, if able to cause an enemy loss. Okay, well, we did that calculation before. This is the only place. Well, they could do it here against the Aedui, but this 1 warband would only cause 1/2 a loss, rounded down, that'd be 0. So it wouldn't do anything. And this could cause 1 loss, but the fort would cut that in half, so that's 1/2 rounded down is 0. So in both cases, would cause no losses. So next they might try to march from Belgica or Germania to Roman, Aedui, or Arverni control, or march in place to remove or to hide. Okay, they don't want to do that because they're already hidden. But let's see if they'd like to march using this other priority. Well, the only place they can march from that's in Belgica and has at least 2 is here in Nervii. And they can't march to any place that has Roman control. Although I just remember this has Aedui control, so they could move here. Okay, so they might do that. Yeah, it does say march 2+. Okay, so this march would move 2 pieces from Belgica, that would be from Belgica, to Roman, Aedui, or Arverni control. Yeah, it would move to Aedui control. Alright, so they're going to do that. They're going to use enlist to move these 2 Germans from Belgica into Treveri. They can do that because Ambiorix is right next to that space. Okay, that removes the Aedui control from that space. One's not controlled now. And that's the end of the Belgic turn. Okay, and so now it is time for winter quarters. Well, this is going to be a very short winter round. Because the very first thing is we check for an auto win, and that is in fact triggered. Yeah, the Belgians win. They have a 17. They're control plus allies. So they have control of all of Belgica, which is 7 total population control. 3 plus 2 plus 2, 7. And they have 10 allies or citadels on the board, so a total of 17. They only need 16 to win. Okay, so that's it. Let's look at everyone else's victory margin while we're here. The Arverni, they only managed to get 3 allies on the board. They had more than that, but the Romans destroyed 2 of them. So they were up to 5 at one point, but they still were not close to the 9 that they need. Also, they had 4 legions off the board, but that's because those 4 legions never got a chance to get into play. And they need at least 7 of off-map legions. So they weren't close on that either. Okay, the Aedui weren't anywhere close because they want to have more allies than anybody else. They only had 2, and the Belgians had 10, so they were way ahead of them. Okay, so they weren't even close on that. The Romans, well, they weren't that far off. They want to subdue all the tribes in Gaul, basically. So they take the subdued, the dispersed, and all of their allies, add them together, and in this case, that gives them 13. They need at least 16 to win. They were only off by about 3. So they were the next closest. Okay, but that's it. Game ends right here with a Belgic victory. You know, it's hard to see how in a Nullitaire game using these bots, the Belgians wouldn't just win at about this point every game. The Romans just, I mean, they could not get their act together. Look, those 5 legions have been sitting in Britannia the whole game. They never moved. They never tried to attack the Belgians, nothing. They just sat there. And Caesar just kind of puttered around over here. He hardly moved at all either. They certainly made no impressive moves on the Belgians at all. They just kind of let them do whatever they wanted. The Arverni, I mean, Vercingetorix spends his time basically just trying to churn this giant army. And presumably, eventually, it gets moving once he gets, you know, basically all of his warbands on the table. But it just takes too long to have any hope against the Belgians. On the other hand, the Arverni are probably not, you know, are not that interested in fighting the Belgians. They're more interested in fighting the Romans and the Aedui anyway. So I guess they would kind of take a Belgian victory to be partly their victory too. They probably wouldn't mind it so much. The Aedui were getting going. I mean, it takes them a while. They're very slow in general. They were getting going. But they're not any kind of military powerhouse. They're not going to be able to take on the Belgians by themselves. They really need the Romans to do that. They can provide support to the Romans, you know, financial support, resources. And with the Viciacus in play, they can even supply some manpower to the Romans. But the Romans just, I mean, they just didn't really, they weren't really very aggressive. It's kind of surprising that the Roman bot wouldn't be a much more aggressive bot than it is. But, you know, that's the way it is with Nullitaire using bots out of the box a lot of the times, because bots out of the box are designed for solitaire play. And typically the theory is something like, let's design a bot to be highly defensive to offer a challenge to a human player. So bots aren't usually designed from that perspective to be aggressive. They're usually designed to be passive and kind of defensive, to sort of put up a wall to make it hard for a human player to win. They're not usually designed to try to advance their own win conditions. They're usually designed to try to hinder the win conditions of other factions, which I think is a shame. Maybe not from the point of view of solitaire play, I don't know. But from the point of view of Nullitaire play, it's a real shame because, you know, you don't really see the bots do a lot very interesting much of the time. They just kind of sit there and play very passively. That's not that interesting. Better to see bots that are trying to advance their own agenda. Okay, anyway, so I think the Roman bot was a little bit disappointing. The other ones I think worked pretty well. The Arverni, yeah, trying to really build up that army, but you know, unless the Romans are going to hold back the Belgians, the Arverni are really not going to get a chance to make that army do anything. So anyway, they do have to count on the Romans to some degree. Kind of odd. They have to count on the Romans to keep things in check so that they can get their army built up. Okay, well, we'll end this this playthrough here. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any comments or suggestions even for future Nullitaire playthroughs. I'd be interested to hear. Okay, till next time. Bye-bye.